So you've added a couple of other components to our list of things that we're considering here.
Yeah.
When we started off, we were thinking about
student practice.
well, we were thinking about a couple of different things. Student practice was helping us to figure out, is there a trend with how she's teaching to the different groups that we pulled out? And one of the things that we decided was there has to be something going on with the way that she's setting up low and high groups, particularly because they're so
there's only low and high groups.
There's only low and high groups, and there's nothing we're doing to the middle. And so I think our one working theory out of that is just the fact that, you know, she's not necessarily teaching to the middle. When she gets into these harder subjects or these harder things like the word problem or the prop or the multiplication or the estimation, perhaps the kids who can't automatically get it on their own, they're already going to be at a loss, because she's not necessarily teaching to the whole class. Maybe she's only teaching to those top learners, and then for everyone else, like we saw the results go down dramatically for everybody. I mean, one theory is like, how does she teach to the broad majority of the class? But I don't even know if that's the primary theory. Now that we're also adding these components of like the way that she's planning may not be directly aligned to the way that she's assessing, which could also go back to, you know, maybe some of the Unit 4, 5, and 6 assessments, when the things got harder, she wasn't setting up her kids well to actually master that material, because the way she was teaching and planning wasn't going to lead them to success. And then, you know, she gave them an assessment that had nothing to do with what she had taught them.
It's
so
like,
that could be
it's
another
like related, but the formatting is so different that kids got caught up in not understanding what the questions are asking them, even if they knew the skill, because they hadn't experienced that learning goal or the rigorous part of the learning goal in application mode, just in skill mode. You know what I mean? Like they're just, it was a question about, I don't remember, angles or triangles or something, but it was a word problem where they had to like think critically. But they weren't thinking critically about it the week before because the teacher's plans were mainly classified.
Walk me back to when you were talking about the word problem. So like the way she had her kids, the way she set up teaching word problems for her kids, like what was her thought about how she wanted to assess that?
This is before I had her tracker, so I didn't really know what was going on, but she just like dropped it in the middle of the conversation. She's like, how do you teach word problems? I was like, what? Like, it was just like, she was just kind of like all the thoughts of like, I'm confused, I need help, kind of going on in her head. So she didn't know how to get her kids to master word problems. So there's. And
how did she know her kids weren't mastering it at the time?
I'm assuming because of her.
Because she had
I mean, she's already given the assessment. I just didn't have the data yet. That's all. She was in the process. Oh, that's what it was. She was transferring it to my computer. And so she just. So then I said, well, what do you mean? How did you, you know, just where's this coming from? Like, tell me a little bit more. And she was just telling me like the way she was teaching her kids how to do it. It was like a lot of tricks, but they weren't tools that the kids could use to then solve all word problems. And it was mainly like circle numbers, underline words, and then like she drew something, I don't remember. It was like think through operation. It just wasn't, I don't think students knew what that meant or knew how to do it. So I didn't see it in action, so I can't give more context, but I know it's just a broader thing of students aren't solving word problems every day. You know what I mean? Like students aren't engaging with problem solving for math. It's mainly classify, organize, sort, you know, compute, things like that.
I mean, I feel like even in the way you're describing how she's teaching word problems, like how she's trying to figure stuff out as she goes along about how she wants to teach something. One big question, and there are probably others that we need to have answered going into this classroom, but one big question, just looking at her data and thinking about what you know of her from your recent co-investigation, is like, I want to know, how is she teaching to her whole class? Like, how is she teaching in a way that's going to reach her whole class? Like,
and I feel like every time I've gone, they're already in small, most of the times I've gone in, they're either in small group or she's finishing the guided practice, where I've been in her classroom a few times. I've seen her teach actually every subject at this point, and the 2 times I was in there for math, it just felt very chaotic. And
this is when they had gone to group work already?
Or even before they went to the group work, they were sitting whole group, and it was very much that a child came up to the board to answer the question they all just worked on, and the 3 kids around me all had it wrong, and no one was coaching and correcting them. And so I was at the time, because I couldn't, you know. So, and then she broke them into groups, and I noticed that the 3 or 2 around me all went to the carpet with her, and then like the few that like were doing mostly, you know.
Do you think she knows, like, do you think she's actively using this information?
No.
Like, for example, would you see a group of, you know,
yeah, it was like
Chanel, Maya, Draven, all together? Like
the high ones were all working at the desk independently.
Okay.
And they were working independently. I mean, it was very,
so she knows the group.
She knows her
like,
high and low.
How do I
she
create
knows,
something appropriate for them? And
she knows her high and low, but when she comes to her high group, they're just doing like the on grade level problems from the book at that time. And when her low group, she was remediating with a whiteboard. And so, and kids were like sitting on the carpet, like, I said to her afterwards, like, it just wasn't conducive for learning. Like, some students were on a beanbag, some students, and they were distracted. Just, they were smudged on the carpet, probably the size of your little green area here. So, I think that's just one concern, is that I think it's become, oh, I know who my high kids are and who my low kids are, and then not using the data to know exactly where the students are and what their gaps are, to then when you pull them, either you've pre-planned what you're doing in a small group in terms of what they, like your tracker, or you're doing the right kind of checks for understanding during the lesson and coaching and correcting, that you know who needs a couple extra practice problems before you do independent practice, and who then needs independent practice, who's gonna finish early, who then needs like challenge work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So if you had to give me 3 things that you're gonna look for
Tomorrow,
when you go into this classroom, based on what you know about this teacher, based on what we just talked through with their data, 3 phases of the lesson perhaps, or just 3 things that you want to like pinpoint and get more evidence of, so you can have a fully formed theory. What are those 3 things?
So one of the things I want to look for is the INM with the INM ID, because I want to see how she's, I want to see if I'm seeing what key points are. I want to see if she's modeling. Like, I want to see how she's explaining the content to her children.
And what evidence is that going to give you?
If how she's, I mean, first of all.
I mean, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna say like, it's gonna. First of all, I think like the thing that I'm seeing missing in her plans, like she doesn't always understand her lesson plans because the other teacher makes them, and she's like, yeah, I think I have to do this, and then she doesn't get the plans, and so I think she's not prepared, and so I don't think things come out clearly to her children where it makes sense of like. You know, because right now they're doing geometry, so like I would expect to see tomorrow when they're doing congruency, I think is tomorrow. I have the plan. Whatever it is that they're doing tomorrow, that she's explaining content in a way to her children that is clear, right?
Yeah.
That like, so that way when they go into their guided practice, so I guess it is different stages of a lesson I want to see. I want to see first how she's introducing it and explaining content, if there are even concise, clear, like key points that I could pull out, and these were the 3 things your kids need to understand.
Gotcha.
The second thing would be like, how are they engaging together? Is she coaching and correcting during guided practice? That's what I would look for. Because every time I've been in there, I have not seen her coach and correct children unless they've come up to the board and that's a child that she picked. And then I want to see how are students then practicing it either independently or if they break out into groups. Are the students who are working independently getting it right and it's too easy for them? When they're in group, how is she remediating, or how are students actually practicing the content? That's what I'm like ideally looking for. Today, when I was going to go in, I was only going to be looking for these first 2 because I was then going to go see Mary and Grace, and I kind of have an idea of how students are practicing independently, but I'm not 100% sure how they're getting set up to practice that way.